My parents gave my entire college fund to my sister and said, she deserves it more. I just packed my old bags quietly. 6 months later, they begged me to come home. The day I found out wasn't some dramatic, screaming match like you see in movies. No. It was worse because it was quiet. Cold. Almost casual. I remember standing in our living room, the air stale from the summer heat, the smell of Mom's coffee burning on the warmer. I was grinning like a fool clutching the acceptance letter from my dream college, 4 years of staying out of trouble, grinding through school, working weekends to keep busy, and it had all led to this. Dad barely looked up from his crossword puzzle. Mom didn't even stand up from her recliner. She just sipped her coffee and said, "Yeah, about that. You're not going." At first, I laughed. I thought she was kidding. A bad joke, maybe? She and Dad had always said there was a college fund. Since I was 12, it had been the one promise they repeated every birthday, every report card ceremony, every awkward family dinner. You work hard, daughter, and we'll make sure you get to college. I worked hard. I stayed out of trouble when others didn't. I said no to parties, skipped vacations, and told myself that if I kept my head down, the payoff would come. And now staring at them, my letter trembling slightly in my hands, all I got was a shrug. "It's all gone," Mom said. "We gave it to Eva." Eva, my younger sister. Eva, who had never passed a class without cheating. Eva, who wrecked 2 cars by the time she turned 17. Eva, who could charm the socks off anyone for long enough to avoid real consequences. I felt my mouth open, but no words came out. Mom leaned back in her chair, stretching like she just finished a long day's work instead of shattering my world. "She deserves it more," she said. "She's got potential. She just needs a little help to get serious. You'll figure something out." I wish I could tell you I screamed. That I fought. That I demanded to know how they could do this to me after everything. But I didn't. I just stood there feeling my heart crack in slow motion, realizing that all those years of sacrifice had been invisible to them. Meaningless. Dad finally looked up, his expression a mixture of impatience and dismissal. "Your sister needs this opportunity more than you do," he added, folding his newspaper with deliberate care. "You've always been the responsible one. You'll land on your feet." The acceptance letter crumpled in my hand as I squeezed it tight, the corners digging into my palm. All I could think about was the countless nights I'd stayed up late, studying while Eva partied. The weekends I spent working at the local diner while she slept off hangovers. The science fair trophies, honor roll certificates, and perfect attendance awards that papered my bedroom walls. None of it mattered. I'd been running a race they never intended to let me win. I walked upstairs without another word, each step heavier than the last. I found my old duffel bag, the same one I used for soccer tournaments in middle school, stuffed it with a few changes of clothes, my battered laptop, and a little bit of cash I had saved up from my after-school jobs. No one tried to stop me. Dad didn't lift his head. Mom didn't move from her chair. I stared at my room one last time before leaving, the faded blue walls I'd painted myself when I was 14, the string lights draped across the ceiling that made even the darkest nights feel magical, the bookshelf sagging under the weight of second-hand textbooks and novels I'd collected over the years. This room had been my sanctuary, my escape when family dinners grew too tense or when Eva's drama consumed every molecule of oxygen in the house. Now it just felt like another lie. I guess Eva was out somewhere, probably celebrating her new life with my future. When I stepped out onto the porch, the cicadas buzzing loudly in the humid air, I realized I didn't even know where I was going, but it didn't matter. I knew one thing for certain. I was never coming back. I slept in my car that first night. It wasn't a plan. Honestly, there was no plan. Just a numb autopilot version of me driving aimlessly until my old Civic's gas light flickered on. I pulled into a Walmart parking lot, leaned the seat back, and stared at the cracked roof fabric, feeling smaller than I ever had before. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I kept thinking maybe Dad would call. Maybe Mom would at least send a text, something, anything. But my phone stayed dark. Not a single missed call. Not a single message. The night stretched endlessly, each hour marked by the distant sound of car doors slamming, shopping carts rattling, and the occasional security vehicle making its rounds, headlights sweeping across my windshield. I curled up under my old high school sweatshirt, using my duffel bag as a pillow, trying to ignore the fear gnawing at the edges of my consciousness. What had I done? Where would I go? How long could I survive like this? Morning couldn't come fast enough. The next few days blurred into one long stretch of canned soup, job boards, and sleeping with one hand on the door lock. I pawned my old Xbox for gas money. I sold my watch, a gift from my grandmother before she passed, to a pawn shop that gave me less than half what it was worth. I couldn't afford pride anymore. I picked up day labor where I could, lifting furniture for moving companies, sweeping dusty warehouses for cash under the table. One afternoon I unloaded trucks at a garden center, my muscles screaming with each heavy bag of soil, my hands raw and blistered by closing time. The manager paid me in cash, counted out bills with tobacco-stained fingers, and asked if I'd be back tomorrow. I nodded, though my body begged for rest. I found a truck stop with showers where, for a few dollars, I could wash away the grime and sweat, standing under water that never quite got hot enough, using sample-sized soap I'd collected from hotel lobbies. I'd stare at my reflection in the clouded mirror afterward, barely recognizing the hollow-eyed girl staring back. Had it only been a week since I stood in our living room with that acceptance letter? It felt like years. Everywhere I went, it felt like the world could smell the desperation on me. The way convenience store clerks watched me a little too closely. The way hiring managers' eyes would slide past my application to the next person in line. Still, a tiny ember inside me wouldn't let go. I kept thinking about that moment. Mom saying Eva deserved it more, and instead of giving up, it ignited something. A quiet anger. Not the kind that makes you punch walls. The kind that makes you build something with your bare hands just to prove you exist. I found a flyer taped to the window of a beat-up coffee shop, space for rent, cheap. No questions asked. It was a shoebox, barely bigger than a storage unit, tucked behind a crumbling strip mall. But it had 4 walls, a roof, and an outlet to charge my phone. The landlord, a gruff woman named Connie, didn't even blink when I said I didn't have first and last month's rent ready yet. Just said, "You hustle, you stay." Connie was in her 60s maybe, with steel gray hair cropped close to her skull and hands covered in a roadmap of scars and calluses. She owned the entire strip mall, she told me, bought it when her husband died and everyone said she should sell it and move to Florida. Men are always telling women what to do with their property, she said, jingling the keys before handing them over. Turns out I like proving them wrong. And so I hustled. I spent my days working whatever jobs I could find, and my nights sketching out ideas on scraps of paper, ways I could build something that no one could take from me. I didn't have a college degree, but I had hands that could work, a mind that refused to quit, and absolutely nothing left to lose. At first, I tried everything: dog walking, freelance writing, logo design for small businesses. Anything to keep the rent paid and ramen in my cup. But nothing stuck, nothing felt right. Until one evening, passing by a pile of furniture someone had left on the curb for trash pickup. There was an old coffee table, solid oak beneath layers of scratches and stains. Without thinking, I hauled it back to my tiny space. I started with sandpaper, stripping away years of neglect until my fingers bled and sawdust coated every surface of my shoebox apartment. I couldn't afford proper tools, so I made do with what I could find: borrowed sandpaper, half-empty cans of stain from the back room of the hardware store where the manager took pity on me, brushes washed and rewashed until the bristles splayed. I worked through the night, the rhythm of scraping and smoothing somehow calming the chaos in my mind. By morning, that discarded table had transformed. Not perfect, but beautiful in its resilience. I snapped a picture on my phone and posted it online for sale, not expecting much. It sold within hours, to a young couple furnishing their first apartment. The woman ran her hand over the smooth surface, smiling. "It's exactly what we were looking for," she said, counting out cash. More cash than I'd made in days of hauling boxes. I started driving around wealthy neighborhoods on trash day, looking for discarded furniture. It was amazing what people threw away: solid wood dressers with broken drawers, end tables with water rings, chairs missing a spindle or two. I dragged them back to my tiny space one by one, sometimes making multiple trips with my struggling Civic. With some sandpaper, wood glue, and paint I bought from the hardware store's discount section, I started bringing them back to life. The first month was painful. I lived on packets of instant noodles and apples, saving every penny for supplies. I learned through trial and error how to repair veneer, how to match stain colors, how to reinforce wobbly legs. I watched endless tutorials on my phone, the screen propped against paint cans as I followed along. Some pieces were disasters. Some turned out better than I could have imagined. My little rented space became a workshop. I'd drag pieces in through the back door, work on them under the harsh fluorescent lights until my eyes burned, then sell them online. The first piece, a small bedside table I'd painted a soft blue, sold within hours of posting. I almost cried when the woman handed me $60, telling me it was perfect for her daughter's room. "You have an eye for this," she told me, already taking pictures of the table to show her friends. "Do you have a business card or something? My sister's redoing her whole house." I didn't have a business card. I didn't even have a business name. Just a desperation that was slowly transforming into determination. That night, I sat on my makeshift bed, a foam pad on the floor of my workshop, and created a simple logo and business cards at a website that offered free designs. Phoenix Furniture Restoration, I called it. Rising from the ashes, just like I was trying to do. It wasn't glamorous. I was still living off ramen and dollar store peanut butter. But slowly, a flicker of hope began to push back the dark. And I kept quiet about it all. No social media posts. No calls home. No reaching out to people who might ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. I wanted to grow this thing in the dark, where no one could stomp it out before it had the chance to breathe. Connie stopped by sometimes, bringing coffee and chipped mugs, watching me work on a spindle or drawer slide. "You got talent, girl," she said once, running her hand over a refinished tabletop. "Don't let nobody tell you different." Coming from her, with her permanent scowl and few words, it felt like winning an award. My hands changed that summer. The soft palms of a student hardened into a craftsman's tools. Calluses formed where sanders vibrated against my skin. Tiny scars from splinters and errant chisel slips became badges of honor. My fingernails stayed perpetually rimmed with stain, no matter how much I scrubbed. But when I ran my hands over a finished piece, feeling the silky smoothness of well-worked wood, I felt a pride I'd never known before. The first time a customer commissioned a custom piece, a farmhouse table for a family of 5, I panicked. It was one thing to restore something that already existed, another entirely to build from scratch. I spent hours at the library, studying woodworking books, sketching designs, calculating dimensions. The man had paid half up front, more money than I'd seen at once in months, and I was terrified of failing. For 2 weeks, I barely slept. I bought lumber with the deposit money, learning through YouTube videos how to select the right pieces. I made mistakes, plenty of them. Joints that didn't align, legs that wobbled, measurements that were off by crucial fractions. But I kept at it, taking apart and rebuilding until it was right. The day the family came to pick up their table, the father ran his hand along the edge, nodding slowly. "My wife thought I was crazy," he said, ordering a table from someone working out of a storage unit. "But this is better craftsmanship than the stuff they're selling at furniture stores for 3 times the price." He paused, looking around at my cramped workshop. "You're going places, kid." Meanwhile, a few states away, Eva was already making headlines, but not the good kind. First, it was whispers. A neighbor from my old town sent me a message. "Hey, your sister got in some trouble at school?" Then a local news article popped up. "College freshman suspended after sorority vandalism incident." The headline sat there, smug and ugly on my cracked screen. I clicked through, heart pounding. And there she was, Eva, caught in a blurry photo, grinning like a fool in front of a wrecked student lounge, spray paint can still dangling from her hand. The very girl who deserved it more. The article detailed how she and her sorority sisters had broken into the student union after hours, spray painted obscenities on the walls, and damaged computer equipment. All caught on security cameras they'd been too drunk to notice. Eva's face was partially blurred, but that smile, the one that had charmed our parents into giving her everything, including my future, was unmistakable. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just closed the article, turned my phone off, and got back to work. Because by then, I understood something important. They had bet everything on the wrong daughter. And soon, they were going to realize it. Summer melted into fall. I saved enough to buy a portable heater for the coming winter months. My customer base grew steadily, people who appreciated quality work and fair prices. I created an Instagram account for the business, careful to never show my face, just my hands and my creations. The follower count ticked up slowly but steadily. One night in October, as I worked late sanding down a desk for a local teacher, my phone lit up with a news alert from my hometown. Local student expelled following financial aid fraud investigation. I didn't need to read the article to know who it was about. But I did anyway, my heart hammering in my chest. Eva had been caught submitting falsified financial aid documents, claiming hardships that didn't exist. The investigation had revealed other issues, plagiarized papers, exams taken by proxy, a pattern of deception that the university could no longer ignore. The article mentioned that this came just weeks after her suspension for vandalism. The golden child's shine was tarnishing, rapidly and publicly. I thought I'd feel satisfaction, maybe even joy. But all I felt was a hollow sadness for the family that chose so poorly, and for the sister who never had to learn the value of earning anything. I went back to my sanding, the repetitive motion soothing in its simplicity. Forward and back, converting rough to smooth, damage to whole. If only people were as fixable as furniture. It happened 6 months to the day after I left. I didn't even realize it at first. I was sanding down an old coffee table, headphones in, the smell of varnish thick in the air. My phone was buried in my backpack, forgotten for hours at a time, like it always was these days. But when I finally pulled it out to check the time, I saw them, missed calls. First 1, then 2, then 8, all from the same people who had watched me walk out without so much as a goodbye. Mom, Dad, even Eva. I stared at the screen for a long minute. Half of me wanted to block the numbers outright, toss the phone into a storm drain, and pretend they never existed. But curiosity won out. I swiped open the latest voicemail. It was Dad's voice, small and shaking. "Sweetheart, we need to talk. Please. Things are bad. Just call us back, okay? We miss you. We miss you." The words felt foreign. Like he was speaking another language. I sat back on the concrete floor of my tiny shop. The one I had built with my own 2 hands, piece by piece, and listened to the next message. "Mom," gruff and awkward. "Listen, sweetie, it's time we put the past behind us. Your sister's had a rough patch. The family needs you. The family needs you. It was almost funny if it hadn't been so pathetic. I scrolled further, finding the most desperate one of all, Eva herself. Sis, I screwed up, okay? I know you're mad, but can you just come home for a little while, please? Mom's freaking out. Dad's losing it. We need you, girl. The girl who deserved it more. The golden child. Begging. I placed the phone down on my workbench, the screen still glowing with notifications. For a moment, the old pull was there, the need to fix, to soothe, to set aside my own wounds to bandage theirs. It had been my role for as long as I could remember. The peacemaker. The fixer. The responsible one. How many times had I cleaned up Eva's messes? How many times had I swallowed my own needs to meet theirs? I picked up my sander instead. I didn't call back. I didn't text. Instead, I spent that night polishing every piece of furniture I had ready for the weekend's market. I stayed up past midnight, humming along to the soft music in my earbuds, the rhythmic scrape of sandpaper against wood more comforting than any memory of home had ever been. The next morning, I opened Instagram out of sheer habit, and there it was. My old town's local news had posted an update. Former student expelled after financial scandal, police investigating. Eva's face again, but this time no smile. The article explained what I already knew in my gut. After getting suspended, Eva spiraled. Bad choices piled on top of bad choices. Student loans blown on parties. Fake GoFundMe pages set up and exposed. Friends she thought would cover for her turning her in instead. The Golden Girls empire had crumbled, and with it, the last illusions my parents clung to. Now they needed a new savior. And somehow, after everything, after stealing my future and handing it to someone who lit it on fire, they thought it could still be me. The charges were serious enough that Eva might be facing actual legal consequences. The university was pursuing restitution for the fraudulent financial aid. Her so-called friends had abandoned her the moment things got tough. And my parents, the very people who told me I'd figure something out when they gave away my future, were now desperate for me to come fix their golden child's mess. The funny thing is, I didn't even feel angry anymore. Just free. They were reaching out to someone who didn't exist anymore. The obedient daughter, the safety net, the quiet backup plan. That person had packed an old duffel bag and disappeared 6 months ago, and she was never coming back. I didn't rush my answer. In fact, I didn't answer at all, not at first. Over the next few days, the calls kept coming. Dad switched tactics, sending long texts filled with old pictures, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, vacations where we all wore matching t-shirts. Like nostalgia alone could erase everything they'd done. Mom, less subtle, left voicemail after voicemail, each angrier than the last. How dare you ignore your own family? After all we did for you, your sister's your blood, for God's sake. Eva even tried guilt. Come on, sis. You can't just leave us like this. You're better than that. Better than what? Better than a family that only remembered my name when they needed saving? Each message was a rope thrown across a chasm they had carved themselves, hoping I'd be desperate enough to grab hold. But I wasn't desperate anymore. I was thriving. By then, my little furniture business wasn't so little. I had started with simple pieces, tables, shelves, chairs, but had moved on to more intricate work. A local cafe had hired me to build them a custom counter. A boutique downtown wanted display shelves that matched their aesthetic. Word was spreading. I had moved out of the tiny storage space into a proper workshop, still small but with better lighting and ventilation. Connie had helped me find it, negotiating with the owner to keep the rent reasonable. Girl like you needs room to grow, she'd said, handing me another set of keys. This time, I had enough for first and last month's rent, security deposit, and then some. I had regular customers. A feature in the local paper had brought in new orders every week. People actually respected me, not because of what I could do for them, but because of what I built with no college fund, no handouts, no safety net, just me. The thought of going back to that house, sitting at that same battered kitchen table where Mom had once told me I wasn't going anywhere anyway, made my stomach turn. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was done. So one evening, I finally answered a call. Not to explain, not to fight, just to close the door. Dad's voice was breathless with hope. Honey? Oh, thank God. We've been so worried. We just want to talk, that's all. Maybe you can come by this weekend? I waited for him to finish. Then I spoke, my voice low and calm. No. A sharp silence crackled across the line. Dad tried to recover. What do you mean no? I'm not coming back, I said. Not for a visit, not for a talk, not for anything. Sweetheart, please, we're family. I smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. No. You were a family when it was convenient. Now you're just people I used to know. I heard him choke on a sob, but I didn't waver. You made your choice when you gave my future away like spare change, I said. And now I'm making mine. Before he could respond, Before the tears and apologies and promises could come pouring out, I ended the call. I stared at the screen for a second, then turned the phone off. It felt lighter in my hand. Like cutting the last thread of a life that had been dragging behind me like a broken kite. I stepped out onto the porch of my tiny rented shop turned home. The sun was setting, streaking the sky with gold and crimson. Warm air carried the smell of fresh cut lumber and the sound of traffic. It smelled like freedom. I stood there a long while, letting it all sink in. I wasn't the girl who had waited years for their approval. I wasn't the safety net for their bad decisions. I was me, standing on solid ground of my own making. And as I turned, heading back inside to the life I had built without them, I realized something. The past wasn't something I needed to run from anymore. It was something I had survived. And survival, quiet, stubborn, beautiful survival, was the best revenge of all. The thing about walking away is you expect it to feel like a battle. You brace for guilt, second thoughts, regret gnawing at you in the middle of the night, but none of that came. All I felt was quiet, not the sharp bitter kind, the good kind. The kind that feels like standing in an open field after a storm, breathing air that's finally clean. For years, I thought love meant sacrifice, shrinking myself smaller and smaller so they'd have more space. Giving until there was nothing left but the hope they'd notice. But real love doesn't ask you to disappear. It doesn't hand your dreams to someone else and call it family. I didn't owe them an explanation. I didn't owe them a second chance. I owed it to myself to be free. And that's exactly what I chose. Winter came that year with a vengeance. The kind of cold that seeps through walls and makes your bones ache. I'd saved enough to put a proper heater in my workshop by then, but some mornings I'd still see my breath puffing in small clouds as I worked. Those were the hardest days, the ones where the memory of home, warm despite everything else, would creep back in uninvited. But I'd built something else by then too, community. Connie brought me extra blankets without a word. The guy who ran the coffee shop at the end of the strip mall would save me day-old pastries. The local lumberyard started setting aside offcuts they'd normally throw away, calling me when the pile got big enough to be worth the trip. They weren't family, not in the traditional sense. But they were people who saw me, really saw me, and decided I was worth their kindness without conditions. And somehow, that was warmer than any house I'd ever lived in. If you're listening to this, and you're where I was, standing at that crossroads, wondering if you should stay loyal to people who wouldn't blink if you disappeared, hear me clearly. You are not selfish for choosing yourself. You are not cruel for walking away from people who only remember your worth when they're desperate. You are not broken because you got tired of proving you deserved love. You are enough, even if they never said it, especially if they never said it. And sometimes, the greatest act of love you can give yourself is to let go of the ones who made you doubt you ever deserved it. I didn't chase updates. But life has a funny way of bringing news to your doorstep, even when you don't ask for it. A few months after that final call, I heard through an old neighbor that things at home had unraveled fast. The debts Eva racked up didn't magically disappear when she dropped out. The college fund, the one my parents had emptied for her, was long gone. And the embarrassment? It stuck around longer than any of them expected. Mom had to sell her SUV. Dad took a second job at the grocery store on the edge of town. Eva, well, she bounced from one bad decision to another, still convinced the world owed her something. They tried to hold the facade together, but you could only paper over cracks for so long before the whole house crumbles. And me? I was too busy sanding tables, signing new contracts, expanding the tiny business that grew into something real, something solid. No gloating, no revenge, just peace. The sweetest sound in the world. By the time the first anniversary of my leaving rolled around, I had saved enough for a down payment on a real workshop. Nothing fancy, an old garage with good bones and better lighting, but mine in a way that mattered. The day I signed the lease, Connie brought me a plant. For new beginnings, she said gruffly, already turning to leave before I could get emotional about it. It's strange, the things you notice when you're free. The mornings feel different. Not rushed, not heavy, just quiet, the kind of quiet where you can actually hear your own thoughts again. I rented a better place, small but clean, with a little patch of grass out back where I could sit and watch the world go by. No one shouting down the stairs. No backhanded comments at dinner. Just me breathing without apology. The business grew faster than I ever expected. Word of mouth, mostly. One customer would tell a friend, and they'd tell two more. Soon, I wasn't just scraping by. I was making real money, not flashy, not headline-worthy, but enough to pay the bills comfortably, enough to start saving, enough to finally lift my head and look toward a future that felt like mine. I started getting regulars, people who came not just for the furniture, but for the person behind it. One couple, Mr. and Mrs. Harris, stopped by one afternoon to pick up a custom table. They smiled, shook my hand, and said, "You should be proud. You're building something real that matters." And it hit me harder than I expected. Because for the first time, someone saw me not as a backup plan, not as a last resort, but as someone who mattered because of what she chose to become. I didn't have to prove anything anymore. Not to my family, not to strangers, not even to myself. I was already enough. Without the college fund, without the empty promises, without them. Everything they tried to hold over my head, their approval, their money, their love, it didn't own me anymore. It never did. They just made me think it did for a little while. The funny thing is, freedom doesn't feel like fireworks. It doesn't come with some grand movie moment where you throw your arms in the air and scream into the sky. It's quieter than that, softer. But when it settles in your bones, you know you'll never let it go again. Freedom looks like a slow Sunday morning. Drinking bad coffee out of a chipped mug in a workshop that smells like sawdust and hope. It's picking up the phone and realizing you don't have to answer it just because someone demands you to. It's walking through a store and buying yourself something small, not because you need it, but because you want it, without a second thought or guilt gnawing at your gut. It's laughing, real, belly-deep laughing, without glancing over your shoulder to see if someone's going to cut it short. I started making friends who didn't know my past. People who didn't carry the old expectations like chains around their necks. I started dreaming again. Not in the desperate way I used to, clinging to someday like a life raft, but in the way that feels possible, solid, breathing right there in front of you. Dreaming of buying my own building, of expanding the shop, of teaching other kids, the ones everyone gave up on, how to build something with their hands and believe in it. And somewhere along the way, without even realizing it, I stopped waiting for an apology that would never come. I stopped needing them to see me. Because the truth is, people who only loved you when you were useful to them were never really your family to begin with. Family isn't just blood. Family is who shows up. Family is who claps for you when no one else does, even if the clapping is just them standing quietly in your corner, holding space for your dreams. I don't know what Eva's doing now. I don't know if Mom still sits in that old recliner, staring at the TV, pretending she didn't throw away her real legacy. I don't know if Dad still glances at my empty place during holidays, wondering when I'll walk back through the door like nothing happened. And honestly, I don't care. I have my own table now, my own place to sit. And when I look around at the life I built, the friends, the customers, the quiet peace of knowing I chose myself, I don't see them missing. I just see me, finally, fully free. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: you don't have to stay where you're not valued. You don't have to bleed yourself trying to earn love that should have been freely given. Sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is simply walk away and keep walking. I didn't get the life I thought I would have. I got something better, a life that's mine, a future they'll never touch, a peace they'll never understand. And that's enough.